Hello my friends, welcome back to Refit and Sir. My name's George Isted, the Solent Boat Butler. I refit and repair boats for a living. This is a Contessa 32 that is with me for a fairly extensive refit, and behind me you can see where there used to be a galley. I mean, some of it is still here, but in this episode we're going to be rebuilding the galley and making it all chef kiss perfect. If you've seen the rest of this series, this is Project Lottie. She's a Contessa 32 from the mid-70s and she's been with me for a very extensive refit. I've done everything from a full osmosis treatment to rebuilding the forward cabin. The water tank's been out, there's been a new water tank put in, a new floor has been put down, lots of grinding, lots of laminating, lots of painting, lots of flow coating. She's got new tow rails on deck, she's got new deck hardware, she's been completely rewired, she's getting new decking in the cockpit. The list just goes on and on, but we are in the final stages. I've just done the copper coat, which you may have seen in the last episode or one before. I'm not sure which order these are coming out in. It depends when I get round to editing them. But in this episode we're going to be sorting out this galley, which was frankly grim. Before, it had some beautiful 1970s Formica on the work surfaces. It had an old Flavel Vanessa cooker, which was original to the boat in 1976, I'm going to say. That went straight in the bin when the boat first got to me because it needed to be condemned. And it has all been ripped out. I did crack on and do this because frankly there is only so much internet to go round, and I didn't think you'd be that interested in watching me do lots of grinding, lots of cleaning and dealing with lots of disgusting 1970s, 1980s, 1990s dirt, which was beautiful. So that has all been done, and now we're at the stage where this can be rebuilt. Without my face in the way, you can now see the worktops have all been removed. Obviously there's no cooker there, that's the space for the cooker, and behind there was a kind of longitudinal locker front there with some sliding doors, and there was a shelf behind that. That has all been taken out. Up under the deck head there was some really grotty things going on, particularly under a stanchion base that was there, which I have ground out, filled, made look nice, and I have put flow coat on the areas where I have basically finished. So, so that area has been flow coated, and then in here that has all got polyester flow coat as well, just to make it nice and easy to clean going forward. Same kind of down in this locker here, which was probably the grimmest locker on the boat, so that's all nice and clean and ready to go. So this is going to end up a pretty standard galley for a Contessa 32. The sink is going to go back in here. We've got a new mixer tap coming in here. This boat isn't currently able to provide hot water. We don't have a calorifier, and the engine is of an age where it's not able to heat water, so we haven't got a calorifier, but we're going to put in a double mixer tap because that is a upgrade for a future time. In here there's going to be a fridge. Now there was a cold box of sorts in here, a little GRP cold box, but it had very little insulation and wasn't that big, so we are going to be building a fridge to go in here, a very well insulated box that will be fitted. At the back here we're going to have some new locker fronts that go in across here with new sliding doors. There's going to be a new shelf that's going in there as well. I've ripped out a lot of the wood because it was pretty minging, to be honest with you. It's pretty grim. Along the front here, this just had white Formica before, and we're just going to be putting some teak face plywood in there, so the colour of the plywood here is going to match the colour of the plywood that's on the top. And then on the actual worktop we've got here, we're going to be using some Corian. Now it's not actual Corian, it's an alternative made by another company, but Corian is a brand name that most people associated with composite worktops. It is very, very heavy, Corian worktops. I quite like them apart from the weight, but we are going to be only using it on a fairly small area of this boat, so I think the weight increase on the boat is not going to be that significant. Then we've got a brand new cooker to go in here. This has all been prepared, ready for me to start rebuilding, and that is the next job. I think I'm going to start by cutting out the thin veneered plywood that is going to go in here, so that I can rebuild the area that sits immediately behind the top of the engine box, because this is really flimsy and I'm getting fed up of standing on it and thinking I'm going to go through it. So I'm going to start by doing that. I have got the old locker front here, so I can use that as a template for cutting out the new one. So I'm going to cut that. But what I'm waiting for is a delivery of some plywood, which is going to be the base that is going to go on top of here. So I'm going to have plywood, I'm going to recess the sink and fit the fridge unit in, and then the Corian is going to go over the top. So I'm waiting for the plywood that's going to be like the base underneath the Corian, but also some plywood which I'm going to use for templating the Corian worktop that's going to go on top. So whilst I'm waiting for those two, I can make that front and get it mostly to size. I can make the front of that, and I should be able to also make the fridge. Well folks, I am back from the workshop and I have some nice new bits of wood here. I didn't record cutting these out or marking them out or any of that work, because sometimes I've just got to get on and do the work if I'm short on time. I haven't got time to mess around with cameras and what have you, because YouTube is not my full-time job. My full-time job is fixing and refitting boats. If you want to support the show, please do give me a thumbs up if you like this sort of content, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. It does make a massive difference to the growth of this channel and what I'm going to do with it in the long term. So thank you very much. The other benefit of not recording in the workshop when I cut all this out is you didn't see my mistake, because I have cut out this piece of wood here, which is very thin veneered ply, which is going to go in there. I also did the locker front, which is going just out of shot over there, but I made the stupid mistake of cutting it out wrong. This is only veneered on one side, and I put it face to face with the old one, cut around it, and you can guess what's happened is the veneer's on the wrong face, which I realised having just cut it out. But before I go back, I have just been finessing this, because I tried to fit it and it didn't quite fit the first time, but I think having just trimmed this slightly, it should just, I have to bend it slightly, and this is one of the benefits of having very thin plywood veneer. It just about, hopefully, with a bit of wriggling and a bit of bending, I'll fold that in there, get in there, and then wiggle it down, wiggle it up, close the gap. Look at that. That is not bad. So first piece of wood is in. I was thinking of fixing it with contact adhesive, but I don't think I'm going to be able to, because I've got to get it in and slide it up under the headlining, and if I have contact adhesive on it, as soon as it touches, it's going to be glued. So actually what I'm going to do is mix up some epoxy, probably thicken it slightly, smush it over the surface, and then hold it in. So the other thing I've got cut out is the shelf, which goes in the locker. So again, I just used the old shelf, which was pretty grim, stinky and horrible. And if I get this around the right way, hopefully it will fit. So the shelf is going to fit in here, hopefully. I might need to give it a little trim, but yeah, it is slightly too long. So it probably wants the thickness of this wood that I've just put on taken off it, and then it will slide into position, hopefully. Well, I've just given this a little trim with my oscillating tool with a little wood cutting blade on it, and hopefully, having taken about 4mm off it, it's a snug fit, but that's what we want. Actually, that is perfect. Beautiful. Right, shelf is done. I can now put this completely out of the way and forget about it, because it's not going to get fitted yet, because I don't want it to get in the way of doing all the stuff that's down here. just been doing off camera is I have a very scrappy bit of kind of disposable plywood, patterning plywood, which I have been drawing on. I've got a temporary support in there just to hold it in place to try and work out placement of everything. So I've got a new sink coming in, which is 33 by 33 centimeters square one to go in here, and I know the insulation material that I'm going to be using for making the fridge box, which I will come on to because that's quite interesting, is 50mm thick. So there's going to be a super insulated fridge, which will make it very efficient, hopefully, on the battery power. The reason I'm making a new fridge box for this is because the one that came with the boat was very, very small, not particularly deep. You couldn't even stand a bottle of water up in it. So it makes sense to, while we're doing all of this, obviously make a bigger fridge box for the client so that he's actually got a usable amount of space. So I've just been drawing on this, possibly not very easy to see, but I need to work out how far down I can have this fridge box before it starts interfering with the hull. So the plan is to cut out the square in this, and then I can literally run a tape measure down until it touches the hull, lift it up a bit, and then that's my kind of maximum dimension, because I don't want it touching the hull. I'd like to have free air around it. I have been cogitating and thinking about the best way to support this new fridge box, and I've got some fairly decent, hopefully, ideas on how I'm going to achieve that, because potentially when this thing's full of beer or wine or olives, I don't know, whatever the guy wants to eat, it's going to have a fair amount of weight to it, so it needs to be well supported. So but we'll come on to that later in the video. So next up, I'm going to cut this out, do some measuring, and then I've got a plan for what I'm doing with the fridge box, because I'm waiting for the plywood, which is actually going to be going on top of this, and so I'm just trying to get everything else done as much as possible. The other thing I'm going to do is I need to run the 240-volt cables around, because there's going to be a 240-volt socket there and two more through the boat. At the moment I've just got the one 240-volt socket at the nav station under the chart table, which I've been using and I'm using now for power, but I now need to extend that kind of mains power around the boat, but I couldn't do that. Well, I could have done it, but it was going to be much, much easier for me to do that having taken the lid off this, because I've got to run all the power cables around. I would say that would be the subject of a separate video, but it's not very interesting, so I'm just going to crack on and do it, because, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes I've just got to get the job done. Anyway, I'm going to cut this out, do some measuring, and I'll update you in a bit. Now, I've just been measuring, and rather annoyingly, well, it's not that annoying, I knew it was there, there's a seacock that's kind of just here, which limits where I can put the coal box, but it's not a problem, because I was going to have a stepped bottom anyway, just to cope with the fact that the hull side obviously curves up, and I think if I turn the handle around on the seacock, which I can do because it's a Blake's, so it rotates this way, away from the fridge, not currently how it is, which would be towards the fridge. And I might possibly need to just like take an inch or so off the end of the handle. I can make it all fit and have enough depth here for the owner to get some kind of 2-litre bottles of water in. If you're in America, I'm not sure what size that is, but apologies, but you know, big water bottles, because, or wine bottles of course. So what I'm actually going to do now, because I need some lunch fairly soon, is I'm going to go and measure some bottles of water that I've got on the boat, just to make sure that I've got enough depth. Here's my very scrappy drawing, because otherwise I'm going to have to think again, because I think that's a fairly critical dimension to be able to put a bottle of wine, or maybe a bottle of champagne, in one's fridge. So yes, that's the thing that you don't often see when you're employing someone like me to do something completely custom. It's the thinking time and the working out time, and the what materials can I use for this time, and the research time. So So that's what I'm currently into. Well folks, a few days have passed and I've been busy doing various jobs on this boat, some of it videoed, some of it not, but I just wanted to give you a quick update. Obviously you have seen this piece in. I have finished making the back piece. I actually made a mistake when I cut it out the first time. I can't remember if I mentioned that, and had the veneer on the wrong side, but I've fixed that by basically veneering the other side with the same thin plywood that I've used here, which is a good thing as it turns out, because it's given me a much thicker back to the galley. So I'm just going to bring that over. This is just loosely pushed into place at the moment, but you can see there is the new kind of locker front here, and I've used some sapele trim around the edge here. What I need to do, I need to take this out, and what I need to do is find someone who's going to supply me with some plastic tracks here, because we're going to put sliding doors in here as it was before. I'm going to cut a hole out here for the 240 volt socket that's going to be going into the galley. And so yeah, that is progress. I've literally just taken delivery of the plywood, which is going to be the base for this. So I'm going to take that round to the workshop in a minute and cut that out using the old one as a template. And I can bring that back and fit the sink, which I have also got. So that is going to be a square sink. It is slightly larger than the old one. Here it is. It looks quite big probably on its own, but once that's recessed in here, I think it will look absolutely fine. It's the same width, but it's just square as opposed to oval compared to the old sink. And we have some very lovely new taps here, which are going to fit just about there and reach over the new sink. But I've got it so that it's a folding tap as well. So if you need to get in there, you can fold the tap down and it isn't going to be in the way, because this isn't a big boat, it's not a big galley, so anything you can do just to make life a little bit easier is well worth doing. And having a fixed tap I think will be a bit of a pain, to be honest with you. I've got something very similar on my old Contessa, and these are really quite nice. I think they're made in Italy, these things. Can't remember the name of the manufacturer, but they're really rather lovely. Nicely heavy, if you know what I mean. It's a nicely heavy tap. Anyway, so that is the plan. I've just been cracking on off camera a little bit, but this piece here is ready to fit, apart from it needs the tracks on the inside here for the sliding doors, which are going to go in. Cut a hole for the 240 volt socket's going to be in there. All the cables have been run, and I just need to cut a hole in this piece of wood back here so I can poke the cables up and they can be connected up into the socket, so there'll be power when the boat's on shore power. This is the sub top, if you like, so the Korean worktop is going to go on top of this. So what I need to do, I've cut a hole for the sink, but the sink is sitting on top of this, so I need to recess this down into this plywood top, which is simply done using my little palm router, and I've got a bit in the end there. I've literally just drawn around this with a pen so I can take this sink out by pushing it up, and I'm going to just by hand run around it at a suitable cutting depth, probably a mil maybe. It's not very much, just enough so that the sink will drop down into this top and everything will be completely flush. The next big job, which I have started and I'll show you in a bit, is I've started cutting out the pieces of insulation foam material that I'm using to create the fridge box, which is going to go in here. I haven't cut the hole for that yet because I want to build the fridge box first, and then I've got to work out how to attach it to this. I'm probably going to actually attach it to the bulkhead under the counter back there. Well, it's taken a few goes and a bit of finessing on this edge because there's a radius on the inside of the sink just up there, but this does fit in here quite nicely now, so that is sitting flush as far as I can tell with the worktop. If anything, maybe just slightly high, so I might run round it one more time just to drop it down just a smidge, because when I put it in, I want to put it in on some sealant so that water can't get in kind of around the back there, and so I need a bit of clearance for that. The other thing I'm probably going to do, just to make sure, whilst this is marine plywood, to make sure it lasts as long as possible, and that is I will probably, once everything's ready, just give this like 1 or 2 coats of just epoxy all over it, just to let it soak into the wood, just to make sure it is as waterproof as possible, because I don't really want any water that gets kind of stuck down there. It shouldn't happen, but you know, it's a boat, it's a wet place, so I'm hoping that any water that gets down there can't soak into the wood and make this wood expire prematurely, although this stuff is kind of guaranteed for 15 years in a wet environment, so it should be good, but there's no harm in just giving it a quick coat of epoxy and waiting for that to cure before the sink actually goes in. What's next? Cold box, I think. Well, here's the box that I have made to be the fridge. It is got 50mm insulation on it, so it's going to be super insulated. I have also made it as big as I dare, and I need to double check it's actually going to fit in the space available. So I have at the moment just held it together with lots of masking tape, so it does look rough as hell. If it all fits, then I will take all the tape off and I'll fit it together properly. If it doesn't quite fit, then I've got the ability to take it apart and trim it very slightly to make it fit. So I'm going to take the lid off there and then offer up the box into the space where I know it needs to go, and see how it all looks. It has taken a bit of fiddle-faddling to get this to fit. I have removed about 15mm off the length going that way, and I've also removed some material off the back right at the bottom just to kind of match the curve of the hull, and this now goes in. It's sitting on the hull at the moment. It's actually going to sit slightly off the hull once it's fully in place, but we can now take this back to the workshop and glue it together and fit it all together properly, which I didn't want to do until I knew it was absolutely going to fit. What I'm going to do in terms of fitting is I'm actually going to route out a slot underneath the plywood where this fits, and it's going to get lifted up into that slot slightly. So I'm going to head off to the workshop now with it. I need to go and buy some more strong adhesive sealant and start bonding it all together. Well folks, we are in the workshop and this is the glued together fridge box. So if I just take these out for a minute, the pieces have all been just glued together with a very strong adhesive sealant. So this feels pretty solid now, to be honest with you. It just needs kind of finishing off, which is what I was just doing with these pieces of plastic. So these are just kind of trim pieces which I've been cutting up to go round this top edge all the way around here, and they will go all the way around because these are going to be visible, and there'll be a rubber seal that sits on top of that. The inside edges will need a bit of sealing just on the corners just to make them look nice, and then the edges, it shouldn't need it, but I've got some aluminium angle pieces which I bought at the same time as bought this, all came from the same supplier, which I'm going to fit down the sides and across the bottom. It's just going to be glued, so bonded and riveted to the outer skin of this, just to make sure that it is belt and braces super strong. The most important thing is the underneath pieces. So I think if there's any heavy weight in here, we don't want that bouncing around and knocking a hole through the bottom. Again, don't think it will, but I don't see any harm having bought the pieces, which were relatively inexpensive, just to put some extra strengthening on all these corners. So I'm probably going to start by gluing all these bits on, and they are literally just going to be glued on with some adhesive sealant, and then I'll cut up these corner pieces and take it from there. It's going to be ready to fit. So these pieces really couldn't be any easier to fit. I've just cut them to shape, and I'm going to give this a good squeeze of sealant down there. Same along the top. Let's give it a few little blobs, and then, if necessary, I'll hold it in tape with some masking tape once it is in. But I imagine it will stay exactly where it's put, just with the sealant. I would have thought. Give it a good squeeze down. It sticks pretty readily to the foam. Yeah, I don't think I even need to use the tape, so that is going to be just fine. Well, exciting news. I have done quite a bit off camera, but I've finished off the fridge box in the workshop, and it is actually mounted where I need it to be put in the galley now, and it's pretty secure. I was worried about how much weight this potentially could take if someone filled it up with water bottles or something like that, and I just wanted to make sure it was super secure. So I've screwed through this piece of furniture here all the way into the outer casing there. I've done a row of screws there, and I've done an extra couple down there, and on the other side I've done a little bracket which is screwed into the bulkhead low down, and it's screwed into, again, the outer casing of this. I think that's going to be probably more than secure enough, but once it's all in, I might put some additional pieces kind of like underneath the fridge, maybe just a little piece of plywood just bonded in, possibly underneath this as well, just to make sure it can't move. But I think it's unlikely now. It is really well securely fitted, and I have also fitted, well, I haven't fitted, I've also put in the cold plates. I needed to get this out the box just to make sure that it actually fits in the box. I was confident it would because I did measure before ordering, but I need to run this through into the locker where the compressor is going to be for the cold plate, ideally before the top goes on. So I think I'm probably going to do that next. I've fitted quite a few fridges, as you can imagine. It's pretty straightforward. They come pre-gassed, and these connections here with the little caps on to stop them getting dirty, they you just do them up into the corresponding connections on the end of the compressor, and the gas then flows through the system, and basically you switch it on and use it. It just works. So super easy. But what I need to do is drill a hole in this box for this pipe to come out, or pipe which is a pipe within a pipe, with these two connections. So whilst this is quite small, I've got to get these big things through, so it probably wants to be a 20 to 25 mil hole inside of the box, which I'll then have to seal up once I've got this in. Right, let me give you a quick close-up so you can see what it looks like. There you go, that is a much better view of the box. You can see all the corners have got these kind of reinforcement pieces riveted on. They are riveted and glued with an adhesive sealant, so they are not going anywhere. To be honest, the sealant is going to be doing most of the gluing, and the rivets were just there to hold it whilst it cures. That's where you can see I've screwed through into the box and then around on the other side. If I can get the camera in, you can see I've got a very large aluminium piece of angle on there. That's way overkill, way stronger than it needs to be, but it's exactly what I had sitting on the shelf in the workshop, so I thought that'll do the job nicely. So I'm going to drill a hole, see if we can get this cold plate fitted and run the pipe work through to the cockpit locker, which is just the other side of this bulkhead here. Change of plan. My hole saw for cutting the holes in both the fridge bogs and the bulkhead is a bit blunt, so rather than continue struggling with that, I am going to go and buy myself a new hole saw and continue with that tomorrow. But in the meantime, I'll put the top on, because in the first instance I want to roughly cut out a hole here for the entrance, and then I'll be able to get inside with a pen, work around the inside with a pen to mark exactly where I need to cut, and I'm going to then cut outboard of that line I've drawn. The reason for that is I want this plywood to overlap the top of the fridge. The fridge is slightly higher than the surface that this is being attached to on purpose, and what I'm going to do is route out a section like I did here for the sink, but on the underneath, so that there is a little bit of this plywood overlapping, and that will leave enough space for me to put there will be a bit of fridge box showing, and then that will give me enough height so that I can put a foam rubber sealing strip around the inside of this on the top of the fridge box, so that when the eventual top goes on this, it will be sitting on a foam lip on top of the fridge box and not on the plywood, so the plywood won't actually get seen. That's probably quite hard to understand from my description, but maybe you'll see what I mean once it's all cut out. So I've just kind of eyeballed roughly where the edges are. I'm just double checking, and it looks about right. So I'm going to go and get probably my oscillating saw, chop out an initial hole, and then I can mark and chop the final hole that needs to go in this before the router comes out. But before I cut it, if you haven't done so already, please give me a thumbs up, like down below, and if you could subscribe, that would be really, really appreciated. Subscribing to the channel does make a massive difference to the growth of the channel and to me personally. If you can do that, that would be awesome. The more people that subscribe, the more videos will get made, the more funding I get, the bigger the channel will grow, and the more content I'll be able to make for you. Well, I cut a hole out, I had it back in, I've drawn around it from the underside, and I've taken it out again and flipped it over, and you can just see the marks here. I'm not going to cut this on the boat because I won't be able to do it very accurately without having it on a bench, and there isn't space here, so I'm going to take this off to the workshop and do it, and also run round with the router as well with it in the workshop, because I'm just going to make a mess of it if I do it here, and I want this to be an absolutely square, perfect cut. So I will see you probably when this is all done. Things have moved on. I've fitted the cold plate and the compressor. The compressor is in the cockpit locker, and I can show you that in a minute. That was quite a fiddle. I didn't record it, and I'm quite pleased I didn't, because there was a little bit of swearing. But this cold plate just fits, and I've got it temporarily wired into the batteries just to check it all works, and it gets cold, and it does, so it's all functioning as it should. In fact, it's so cold, I think the owner's going to have this on a fairly low setting, at least in the UK, to stop him from freezing his champagne, stroke milk, stroke beer, whatever it is he's got on board. So that's all good. So it is time to finally stick the lid on here. I'm going to be running a bead of sealant around the top of this where it squidges down onto it, just so that that's all sealed. The plywood top that's going on the top of here has also already been sealed with a coat of epoxy all over the underneath surface. I think it did the top surface as well. So that is kind of got as much protection as it needs. Once that's in, I can then lay up some glass between it and the hull here all the way along, and we can start thinking about all the top stuff that's going to go on, and the final worktop and the sink, and plumb it all in. Here's the worktop, or the under worktop. What I need to do is poke the cables for the socket up through this hole, It's going to be impossible to do it once it's in. Oh, this is not an easy job. Should just pop back where it was. Oh, it still needs a little bit off there. That's annoying, but not insurmountable. That one goes down, that one goes down. Doesn't quite go down there. Well, it's going to have to come off again. Well folks, things have moved on. Most importantly, the sun has come out. It's been raining all day and I haven't been able to record anything today until now. So there is enough light for you to see there is a worktop here. So this has been fitted down. I've put a great big bead of sealant around the top of the fridge here because I want that really well sealed. This is screwed down, it isn't glued down, but it is bonded at the back, and if you look closely you can see I've put some glass in here. This is just CSM with a laminating polyester resin, and the shelf is in as well, again glassed in at the top, and I put in a fillet of material, a fillet of polyester filling bonding material just to go along the bottom here, just to give it a little bit more support. Did the same on this, to be fair, as well. I need a bit more support just on this piece that's off camera, and I will show you that in a minute, but I'll also show you what's going on in here. There we go, that's a better view for you without my face in the way. You can see the glasswork in there, so that's all been bonded in. And if we go down here, you can see I've also installed an electric pump. So all these sinks need a pump of some sort, because when the boat heels over, the sink can potentially backfill. So I have wired in a pump there, all the hoses are in, and it's ready for the sink to be dropped in. I need to put a switch in so that when the owner is using the sink, he can just press a press to make switch on there. And once the sink is in, I'm going to be ready to fit the back bit of the cupboard, which is all in the workshop. I've been varnishing it because I need to varnish the sliding doors before they're installed in the back there, because they're going to be difficult to varnish once they are installed. And then that can come down, and we are really getting close to making up the actual worktop that's going to go and finish this off. I haven't yet decided what I'm doing here. The locker front is going to come down to there, and the temptation is to either cut this out or make this removable, either hinged or just lift out, and then create another locker underneath. But I don't know where to put that until I've got the cooker installed. So I have the cooker in the van. I'm going to bring that up in a minute and maybe look at how I'm going to fit that, and then I can work out the swing, because I want it to be able to swing through maybe 30 to 35 degrees, and then once I know the swing, I can know where I can work to in terms of putting an extra locker in behind here to give a little bit of extra storage, because there isn't tons and tons of storage in these galleys on these boats, so anything that is extra that you can find is well worth having. Once that is in, it can all be flow coated and the cooker can be finally put in. Well folks, the exciting news here is that there is a cooker installed. It took quite a lot of measuring, remeasuring, checking things were square, realizing things were not square, but the cooker is in, and it actually needs to come out again because I've got it 6mm too far outboard on the forward end, and it doesn't quite line up and it isn't quite square. But it's quite difficult to fit a reasonably square object into a boat which definitely doesn't have a square hole, and it's kind of a case of working out where you want it to line up and where you're happy to see some misalignment. But I'm going to bring it forward about 6mm and call that done. But the most important thing is it's allowed me to work out the swing, and down the back there you can see there's a little black mark drawn on the hull, and there is some masking tape there. That has allowed me to work out the swing of where the cooker is going to end up when the boat is hard over on starboard tack. and that has allowed me to work out where I can put some additional storage in down the back there. So I'm going to take this somewhat heavy cooker out of its hole, move the mounting bracket, just double check it fits again, and then think about making that little shelf thing down the back there. Now, if you think this is tricky to remove, you're right, because there are two clips I have to push in, and I have to lift a cooker all at the same time. So I'm implying my foot underneath, got that clip open, and get that clip open. This is not an easy thing to achieve. Ah, there we go. It's actually slightly easier to remove than it is to get it in. Oh my God. Working on boats is quite challenging. Getting things in and out of small places when you don't have enough room to sort of hold on to things. It's basically just a reason to have a bad back. So you do need to be kind of careful when doing this sort of work. Right, this, as you can see there, needs to be moved 6mm forward. So I'm going to move the whole plate up, over and in again, and then this will line up correctly with the front, which isn't square, but we've got to line it up with something, and then I can have a little measure up for what we're doing at the back there. Now, those of you watching that are somewhat more eagle-eyed will notice that there is a slight difference in what you are looking at here. And I'm afraid we're going to have to bring this episode to a close right here, because I've got too much content to do the full galley refurb in one video. But you're getting a sneak peek of a finished galley here behind me. So hopefully that means you will come back in a week's time to see the second part in this video, which covers off the galley rebuild on this Contessa 32. Thank you very, very much for watching. Please do remember to like, thumbs up down below, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. It costs you nothing. It takes less than a second. And a very, very big personal thank you to those of you that donate to Refit and Sell using the PayPal link that's down in the description. If you donate to the channel, it really does massively help me out. It pays for microphones. I've desperately got to buy some more because I dropped one in the sea a little while ago, and lighting software and all the other stuff that is associated with producing the content that is sent out to you. So thank you very, very much again from me. I really do appreciate it. So stay tuned. There is more rebuilding to be done here. There is the launch of the boat coming up. The boat is actually currently in the water now as I'm speaking. I'm just finishing off bits and pieces here and there on the boat, so do stay tuned, and there are more boat projects coming on the channel as well, so watch this space. Thanks again. See you next time. Bye for now.